African Americans look at that and say, well, free public education for the South. Because the South, we happen to be Southern. We recognize that these people are Confederates and were lynching us on Monday. But now that we're in power, let's open the franchise to everybody. I'll say more about that later. There's also international activism during this time. In Ethiopia, in particular, African Americans are always internationalists, right? Many stories related to that. So the chapter teaches that public policy can provide opportunity while still reproducing racial inequality. What I mean by that is that when we get to the end of the era, we see that public policy has changed, but we still see inequality. Sound familiar? And so the civil rights movement is birthed of these inequities, right? We got the New Deal, but did that solve the problem of Black employment? No, it doesn't. Looks like we're going to have to do something else, some other strategy. Which of course leads us to the conclusion that African Americans felt during that time that government can be a tool of relief and also a tool of exclusion, surveillance, unemployment, art, and control, sometimes simultaneously. Okay. Now, the New Deal, which is this new public policy structure during this time period, is really important because the New Deal in particular expanded federal responsibilities for economic life. The WPA Arts Program supported writers and artists, including the larger cultural world that made writers like Ellison possible. Okay, the New Deal also preserved, right? These programs also preserved racial exclusions through local administration, meaning we've got this great law up here that says African Americans should be employed, that Black writers should definitely be sponsored, right? That we should create and help to create all of the rest. And inside of the actual practices of public policy, the discrimination still exists. Disproportionately, Black people were excluded from key labor protections. We find that happening in this era, and we find it happening with the institution of the GI Bill, and also with Social Security, right, in particular. We'll talk about those later, but it's just to remember that public policy is not the answer. It is an answer, and sometimes it contradicts. Okay. This, of course, is the same view as it relates to 2026, right? I don't even have to show you any, I don't have to show you any examples, right, of how public policy looks one way, but then when it actually is implemented, it actually doesn't live up to its promise, or at least doesn't satisfy the needs of those individuals, which tells us something about the structure of government in and of itself. There may be a problem with the structure itself. And again, people get all, I don't know, excited about that idea, but it's Jefferson who says that every now and then the democracy needs a pruning. Part of what we're really looking at is once we know these former systems, like for instance, we could say that the problem of segregation in 2026 is to just reverse the Callis versus Louisiana decision, the Dobbs decision, right? All of that related to the SCOTUS, right? Voter disenfranchised. We could say that's to reverse that. But history tells us that just reversing these public policies won't do. It's in the implementation. That's the problem. The analytical task as it relates to the question of public policy as a solution to African American challenges is important if you're a legislator or you in fact are a voter. The questions: who gains capacity based upon this law? Who loses access? And which institution decides the spoils, right? And the spoils really are taxpayer funds, if you really want to think about it. Okay. We can see also inside of this current era, we know that these post-Confederate, right, kind of structures are racist, right? When the South reassumes control, right, after the Union troops pull out after the Civil War, and these governments actually take over,